Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to JCal's View, a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance. My name is JCal, and this is the journey of a journalist. This is where I pontificate about professional wrestling. This is where I talk about wrestling, guys, and I give you my point of view. I never sugarcoat it. I never hem-haw about things. You're going to hear my POV every time you listen to this podcast. And on this episode, this is more of a look historically about the NWA in the land of the rising sun, the Far East, if you will. And I'm talking about Japan, baby. Now, oddly enough, the NWA's relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling is pretty well documented, but there's a lot of history that tends to get forgotten about, especially in those, quote unquote wilderness years of the NWA. And that's where I kind of spent my time today, talking about the NWA, talking about its relationship with promotions in Japan. I mean, it was just a mere, I guess it's 4 years ago now. It wasn't that long ago that our world's heavyweight champion, not Nick Aldis, but Tim Storm, traveled to Japan to defend the 10 pounds of gold. It wasn't that long ago that Rob Conway, teaming with Matt Riviera as the Iron Empire, took the World Tag Team Champions titles to Japan. So after the break, we're going to talk about this long-standing relationship between the NWA and the Japanese professional wrestling, and I hope you will stick around for it. Catch you after the break. The thing that a lot of people seem to forget is how important the NWA title has been to the land of the rising sun over the years. I mean, the National Wrestling Alliance had a very interesting relationship going back to Ricky Dozen and the Japanese Wrestling Alliance. I mean, he was bringing in talents from the West and featuring the NWA World Champions. I mean, not just the World Heavyweight Champion, but also the Junior World Heavyweight Champion. I mean, it's seemingly Japan has this affinity for the NWA. It's kind of like how in the United States, how those southern states love the NWA. And I mean, I'm not a southerner. I'm a Yankee from the north. I live in California, but you can tell the passion that southern fans have about the National Wrestling Alliance. It still continues to this day. I mean, I think that's part of the reason why Billy Corgan chose to do the television tapings in Georgia and do the pay-per-view in North Carolina. It's because of that connection to those southern states where Jim Crockett Promotions was such a big deal. And I feel like in some regards, in Japan, the NWA has a similar footing, a similar a staple of that love, that connection. And the reason why I bring that up is because, they were bringing in Danny Hodge as World Junior Heavyweight Champion. I mean, he and Hiro Matsuda battled over that Junior Heavyweight Championship in Japanese Wrestling Alliance, and then later even in the IWE, International Wrestling Enterprise. And that was like in the 70s. And I mean, it was still happening up until 2017 when Tim Storm defended the 10 pounds of gold against Ryuta Hamada in, I think that was Dream Stage Wrestling. And that was after they had already split from working with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And you might think this has to do, again, with New Japan Pro Wrestling and that Jim Crockett Promotions connections. But it's actually bigger than that. I mean, in 1993, when New Japan Pro Wrestling quietly exited the NWA along with World Championship Wrestling, the World Heavyweight Championship and also junior title would still become regularly featured through multiple promotions in Japan. I mean, you could go back to August 20th, 1995. The NWA member of record Victor Quiones would bring Dan Severn in to face Tarzan Goto at the IWA IWA Japan. Forgive me if I say the name wrong. The Kawasaki Dream Match. And this was a death match tournament. I mean, it's literally death match wrestling. And in the main event, you get a legitimate shoot fighter, a UFC champion, and the NWA World Heavyweight Champion taking on Goto, who was more known for death matches at that time. didn't exactly play by the rules. Later, he would bring Severn back, like almost 2 years later, and he would fight against the great Kabuki, who was kind of the inspiration for the great Muta, and so they added that match then too. By 1999, Antonio Inoki had returned to gain some influence in the National Wrestling Alliance, and he would bring Dan the Beast Severn to his promotion in Japan, not New Japan Pro Wrestling, but the Universal Fighting Arts Organization, also known as UFO, and he would book the match that would feature Noya Ogawa versus Dan Severn. Ogawa would end up winning that title. That would be the end of Severn's first reign as champion. Ogawa would defend it, of course, in UFO, but then he would also defend it in the United States as well. But then he would end up defending that title also again in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, at this point, there was no direct correlation between New Japan Pro Wrestling and the NWA. We're talking about 1999. There was no direct connection. And so he would wrestle against Shinya Hashimoto. Unsuccessfully, Hashimoto would challenge, and he would end up losing that match by referee's decision. Oddly enough, the referee in that match was Tatsuji Fujinami, who was the man that beat Ric Flair for the world title back in, I think it was 92, 93. Hashimoto became kind of synonymous with the NWA. It almost felt like Hashimoto's desire to be NWA World Champion kind of lied with the fact that his brothers in the Three Musketeers, Masahiro Chono and the Great Muta, both had held NWA World Heavyweight Championships, and it seemed like Hashimoto wanted to follow his brothers in having held the IWGP title as well as holding the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And so, although he was unsuccessful in that effort back in '99, he would eventually win that title by beating Steve Corino, and I believe it was, I want to say Gary Steele out in Connecticut, maybe Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm sorry. I was writing more about the Japanese side of the story, but I don't exactly remember what city they were in when they wrestled. But essentially, Hashimoto would take that title back to Japan for his promotion, 0-1. And 0-1 wrestling at the time was 0-1 had Antonio Inoki's proxy, his membership, his ability, his territory, his blessing to be promoting NWA events. Hashimoto would win that title. It's funny, he came out to Southern California and he didn't really have a defense, but he showed up at UPW, Ultimate Pro Wrestling. Now, UPW had a working relationship with the NWA, or rather, they had a working relationship with 0-1, and 0-1 had this relationship with the NWA. And so there was this kind of a triangle of promotion where the NWA titles would be defended in Japan, and a lot of the UPW talent would end up challenging for those titles. That's another podcast, but specifically on this for this show, Hashimoto showed up, and Hashimoto was in full heel. Hashimoto was literally like just verbally assaulting the UPW crowd, and that featured guys like Tom Howard, but more importantly Samoa Joe. And I felt like had Hashimoto held onto that title a little bit longer, we might have seen Hashimoto versus Samoa Joe in the United States. However, that title ended up back in Japan with Hashimoto defending against some of you guys might remember him from WWE, but this was before he came to WWE, and that was Nathan Jones. So Hashimoto, victorious, defends the title against Nathan Jones, only to lose to Dan Severn a couple of weeks later. And then in turn, that's when the Jarretts got involved with the NWA and started TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. Severn was stripped of the title, and the belt would become more or less the licensed property of Impact Wrestling. So that was a pretty cool time, as far as I'm concerned, to see that the NWA would have that title in Japan for so long. But there's one more defense of that title, and I don't normally speak positively of this guy, I don't really love this guy. In fact, if you guys watch this podcast for very long, you know I absolutely despise Joseph Kabibo, also known as the Sheik. I don't know what he's called in MLW, but he's part of the Contra unit. I don't care for the guy. But one cool thing he was able to do as world champion in the brief time that he was champion was on July 3rd, 2011, he was able to go to Japan and defend the 10 pounds of gold against, I don't have his name written down. He defended it in 0-1, so it kind of bridged that gap from when Hashimoto was champion. Then the Sheik came there and had his title. And then, of course, we all know the story about the Sheik getting stripped of the title, and subsequently the junior heavyweight champion, Craig Classic, would forfeit his title but surrender the belt to 0-1. Another set of odd circumstances for another podcast. So there you have it, man. I mean, the connection to the NWA in Japan, I think, is pretty fierce. I think it was pretty cool. And again, as a longtime fan of the NWA, if you didn't know that there was a connection between the NWA and Japanese wrestling, there it is. Of course, you know, we kind of went into it a few minutes ago, but Rob Conway would bring the title back to the NWA. So, you know, there was about a handful of NWA champions who had defended the 10 pounds of gold in Japan. And then, you know, of course, predating that, the big gold belt with Chono and Muda, and then Tatsuji Fujinami. And, of course, way back when, the great... why am I having trouble here? Giant Baba, excuse me. So the World's Heavyweight Championship certainly had ties to the Far East for, you know, whether it be Baba or Tatsuji Fujinami. You know, we talked briefly about the Three Musketeers with Hashimoto and Muda and Chono and the later Ogawa. But the World Junior Heavyweight Championship, that belt itself also has these ties to Japanese pro wrestling. And, you know, we won't talk about the early 80s with Tiger Mask holding the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship, but when you fast forward to like 1988, Nelson Royal was the last man to be recognized as the World Junior Heavyweight Championship for the National Wrestling Alliance, and that was a full 2 years before Ted Turner would end up buying Jim Crockett Promotions and turning that into WCW. So the Junior Heavyweight Championship wasn't even defended for about 5 years. Because after 91, when Crockett is sold to Turner, you know, there is no junior heavyweight title matches on the cards. There is no junior heavyweight title. WCW briefly will recognize a light heavyweight champion, but that is not the same as the NWA junior heavyweight champion. And in fact, it isn't until August 30th, 1995, when the NWA would crown a new junior heavyweight champion with the help of Wrestle Yume Factory. They sometimes were called Wrestle Dream Factory. Now, they held a tournament to crown a new World Junior Heavyweight Champion at the Korakuen Hall in Tokyo, Japan. In the first round, in all the first round matches, there was several of them, Masayoshi Motegi would defeat Ray Gonzalez. There would be a couple of WWE stars, you know, ECW stars as well. Takahashi Okano, sorry if I'm not pronouncing these correctly, would defeat Super Crazy. You guys remember Super Crazy? He had a long-standing, spent some time with the WWE and in ECW. Lucha Libre legend, and I mean legend, El Hijo de Santo, defeated Yoshihiro Tajiri. Now that is the same Tajiri from the WWE. And Kamikaze would end up defeating Unicorn. I don't know who these guys are. I'm sorry I wasn't there. And I don't really have any background on them. In the semifinals, Masayoshi Motegi would defeat Takahashi Okano. Santo would defeat Kamikaze, setting up in the main event in the finals of the tournament. Masayoshi Motegi would defeat El Hijo de Santo to become the new NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. Now that in and of itself is pretty spectacular, because now you have a junior heavyweight championship, and that junior heavyweight championship They hadn't had that in a while. Now, yes, it was in Japan, and although there were some up-and-coming junior heavyweights for the new NWA, this title was pretty much exclusive to Japan. And you'll see why that is, because after a while, that title becomes even bigger than what it was before. Going back on June 11th, almost a year later, Masayoshi Motegi defeats Hector Garza at the Korakuen Hall in Tokyo for that Wrestle Yume Factory, his first title defense. He also will end up facing Shiri at Budokan Hall in Tokyo, and that's for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Does that kick off any bells for you? Now, I didn't really want to talk about the connection between New Japan and the junior heavyweight title, because there's lots of instances of that. But as it continues to go, on August 2nd, 1996, as part of the J-Crown tournament, the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion, the Great Sasuke, would defeat Masayoshi Motegi to win the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title. And that was on the first night of the New Japan G1 Climax TV show, and Raikuku, I'm not sure if I'm even saying that right. I'm not going to even try, but that was in Tokyo, Japan. And then August 4th, 1996, during the semifinals, the Great Sasuke would defeat El Samurai to capture his WWA World Light Heavyweight Championship and the WWF Lightweight titles. And that basically means that the Great Sasuke was holding 4 different titles: the IWGP Junior title, the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Championship, the WWA World Light Heavyweight, and the WWF Light Heavyweight titles. On August 5th, during the finals of the J-Crown tournament, the Great Sasuke, who again held those 4 titles, would defeat the Ultimo Dragon, who held the War International Junior Heavyweight Championship, the MPW British Commonwealth Junior Heavyweight title, the UWA World Junior Light Heavyweight title, and the NWA World Welterweight title. So, at the end of those finals, that was 8 titles, 8 separate wrestling promotions junior championships to become the J-Crown. And on October 11th, 1996, the Ultimo Dragon defeated the Great Sasuke to win the J-Crown. And that happened at War's Osaka Crush event at the Osaka Prefectural Gymnasium in Osaka, Japan, of all places. On December 1st, Ultimo Dragon would defend that title against Grand Nanawa at the Inoki Festival in Yokoyogi National Gymnasium No. 2 in Tokyo, Japan. So now you've got a couple defenses of that J-Crown. On December 13th, as almost like a rematch from their initial J-Crown match, Ultimo Dragon defeated Masayoshi Motegi at the Wrestle Yume event in Kumaga, Satsuma, Japan. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. And then on December 29th, 1996, Ultimo Dragon defeats Dean Malenko for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship at Starrcade at the Municipal Auditorium in Tennessee. So now the 8-tuplet title becomes the 9-tuplet title. I know I'm not saying that right. 9 championships, basically the J-Crown and the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. On December 30th, Ultimo Dragon defeats Jushin Thunder Liger on Monday Nitro in Knoxville, Tennessee. So now the WCW, the promotion that walked away from the NWA in 1993, now 3 years later, is showcasing that title along with 8 or 7 other junior heavyweight championships as part of that J-Crown. Now, shortly after this, the WWE wanted to create their own light heavyweight division once again, and the titles would be split, and the recognition for that junior heavyweight championship would revert back to the National Wrestling Alliance. But there's a perfectly good moment in time where the NWA title was held as the same with the same integrity and vigor and honor that the IWGP title held, that the WWF light heavyweight title held, that the UWA light heavyweight title held. I mean, promotions not just representing Japan, but Mexico, the United States, the UK, all these championships as one crown, something that we will probably never see again. But for a brief time, we had a single competitor with 9 active junior heavyweight championships in the likes of Ultimo Dragon. And again, there was an NWA World Junior Heavyweight Championship and that J Crown. So I think that's pretty cool. And again, shows you the value that the Japanese placed on the NWA brand. Now, the tag team titles. We would be remiss if we didn't mention the tag team titles. Now, remember back in 1993, the NWA and WCW had a unified World Tag Team Championship, meaning that Brian Pillman and Steve Austin held the unified tag team titles. They were the NWA and WCW Unified World Tag Team Champions. And now those titles changed hands for the last time under the WCW banner in 1993 on August 18th. And that was at the Clash of the Champions number 24, where the Horsemen, Arn Anderson and Paul Roma, would become the new tag team champions. Now, again, WCW splits from the NWA, and now there are no tag team champions. There are no champions at all. I mean, they basically, anything dealing with WCW has been washed away. So the NWA needs to crown new champions, and they do so in NWA Dallas, where the Rock and Roll Express win a tournament to become tag team champions. And they have those titles for basically about a month. They had the titles for basically about a month in 1995, from April the 11th through April 25th. By May 5th, 1995, NWA Dallas ceases operations. Jim Crockett Jr. is officially done with the NWA. Their last defense would be against Dick Murdoch and Randy Rhodes at the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas. And again, that was on April 25th, 1995. The NWA Dallas would hold their last event in Wichita Falls in Texas on May the 5th. So with the backing of the NWA member Victor Quiones, IWA Japan would be the next area, the next territory, who would set forth to crown a new set of NWA tag team champions. And over an 11-day period from November 27th to December 9th, the NWA would tag the NWA World Tag League. Let me try that for a third time. The NWA World Tag League would be part of the IWA Japan second year final battle tour. Now, what's ridiculous about this is IWA Japan was essentially a blood and guts promotion. I mean, this place was filled with death matches. You guys have seen some of it if you've searched YouTube. Mick Foley speaks at length about his time in IWA Japan with their death matches. This kind of IWA Japan was kind of like the rival promotion to FMW, that's Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling. And again, that's where a lot of the deathmatch wrestling first started off. And when you look at this roster that participated in the tag tournament, it's fairly obscure as well. You've got Bam Bam Terry Gordy, a former NWA tag team champion in his own right, teaming with Kizo Matsuda. He's most known as the fake hard gay for Hustle. Then you had Flying Kid Ichara teaming with Miguel Perez Jr. Miguel Perez Jr. is a talent that wrestled for the IWA Puerto Rico as well as WWE. He was part of Savio Vega's Boricuas. The Headhunters, who, if you followed ECW, you saw them. They wrestled at ECW, and I think they had a handful of matches in the WWE. You had Leatherface and Shoji Nakamaki. Now, Leatherface, another hallmark of IWA Japan, was to take these, villains from horror movies and turn them into wrestlers. And you'll see, like, Leatherface. There on this card, there's also Freddy Krueger, someone else named the Boogeyman, no relation to the WWE's Boogeyman. The next tag team would be Cactus Jack and Tiger Jeet Singh. For a brief time, Tiger Jeet Singh's son actually competed in the WWE. Then you had Mr. Ganosuke and Tarzan Goto. Now, we mentioned Tarzan Goto as the man who challenged Dan Severn for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Then you've got the Boogeyman and Freddy Krueger, and rounding up the tournament was Keisuke Yamada teaming with former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Terry Funk. So like I said, that tag team division is wild, man. I mean, you've got Terry Gordy teaming with deathmatch wrestlers. You've got Terry Funk and Cactus Jack. Now, of course, those guys kind of revitalized their careers in Japan with IWA, and were known for a lot of that deathmatch wrestling. And those guys being Cactus Jack and Terry Funk. And the round robin tournament ended with Cactus Jack and Tiger Jeet Singh losing to the team of Mr. Ganosuke and Tarzan Goto. And at the time, Cactus Jack was regularly working for ECW. I mean, he speaks at length about his time in IWA Japan and working with Terry Funk in the New York Times bestseller Have a Nice Day. And those titles would essentially be like defended in IWA Japan. Amidst all this crazy like deathmatch wrestling, the NWA World Tag Titles were there. Now, around 1996, the NWA or Victor Quiones and the IWA would kind of end their relationship. The promotion that he founded would shut its doors. Well, I mean, it wouldn't shut its doors. Let me rephrase that. He would walk away from the promotion. He had opportunities, again, in Puerto Rico and with working with the WWE to bring talent to the WWE. And he had on-air roles with IWA Puerto Rico. So he left Japan for greener pastures, and basically the titles would be abandoned around 1996. And it wouldn't be for a few more months when C.W. Anderson and Pat Anderson would win those tag team titles in a tournament. But there it is again, the NWA, this long-standing, rich in tradition, historical legacy, is still sought after in Japan. And, that's the example of the tag titles. Of course, we mentioned the world title and the junior heavyweight championship. We know that the women's championship would be defended in Stardom. It would also later be defended with 0-1 and its connection to the, the fake AWA. And so it was just a wild experience for the NWA to have its championships, even when it was at its lowest regard, still sought after in Japan. And, again, it's a trend that, continued until, as recent as 2017 when Tim Storm defended that title at the Diamond Star Wrestling. So we don't know what's going to be next for Billy Corgan's NWA. We don't know what's going to happen next with Nick Aldis and Serena Deep and Trevor Murdoch and Kratos and Stevens. We just don't know. But, as a longtime fan of the NWA, I would always say, never never assume that it's impossible, because we've seen it happen time in and time again. So maybe we will see Serena Deep defend the NWA Women's World Championship in Stardom. We may see Nick Aldis make that trek to Japan, or maybe, to defend either New Japan or Noah. We just don't even know. Or maybe JR Kratos and Aaron Stevens will be a part of the New Japan Tag Team League. Anything really could happen. And, the whole point of this is just to show that there is an affinity for that NWA brand in the land of the rising sun. Hey, if you like this podcast, would you mind giving us a thumbs up? And if you really like it, would you mind sharing it with your friends? We really do appreciate your patronage. We really do appreciate you listening to the podcast. And we do a live YouTube stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, youtube.com/The Alliance Blog. We'd hope you check that out. And until next time, we'll see you at the matches.